Intelligence is the fundamental reality. Because the point is not just that dialogue is the essence of the real. It turns out that dialogue is the essence of what we consider to be intelligent behavior. It's what we mean by intelligent behavior. Intelligence, in other words, on any level, is a social phenomenon. You never get to a pure individual. This is one of the spooky things. There's a Chinese box idea that you get when you study physical reality, things, made of lesser things, made of even smaller things than that. And so the body is made of its parts, which are made of its tissues, which are made of its cells. And the cells are made of all these complexes of DNA molecules, which are themselves very, very fancy proteins. Can be broken down further, and finally you get down to the atom after many stages of systems within systems within systems. But wherever you go, you never find the pure, unsullied, solitary individual. Everything on every level is always already enmeshed in this kind of...
It's all part of the field.
It's all part of the field. And you see, the drive in Newtonian mechanics was that you could have a very satisfactory deterministic predictive system if you could have a characterization of each of the parts of the system, a state description at a given moment. Then you plug in, you do it with any computer, you plug in your laws, you ask for the time in the future that you want it to predict that a planet is going to be in a certain location, and it does it. It works very well with the planets, by the way. That's where Newton is stunningly accurate because of the characteristics.
The difference between Newton and quantum physics, the biggest difference is there were fields. Newton was aware of fields. He was also aware of particles. He thought they were two separate and distinct entities. What we're now finding out is they are not. The field and the particle are inextricably in communication with each other, and the essence of the argument now is which is primary. Is the particle part of the field, or is the field acting on the particle? Quantum mechanics says the particle is primary and the field simply controls its actions. Quantum field theory says that the field is primary and the particle is simply a manifestation or a conversation in the field, if you like.
And that's a wonderful point that you make about Newton, because Newton was not only the scientist who gave us the mechanics that enabled us to do such wonderful things when it came to astronomy, for example, but also wrote that other wonderful book, his Optics, in which he deals with wave phenomena and recognizes all the fringe phenomena that are, of course, make sense only under the hypothesis of waves. Newton was brilliant and very advanced. He did have he said he couldn't justify it, and he didn't want to go there in any official capacity. He did express a favoritism toward the corpuscular theory. He hoped that in the future they would be able to show that the same kind of technique that he used in his billiard ball universe of planets, ultimately the wave-like phenomena, light itself, he hoped would be shown to be corpuscular, particulate in the final analysis. He hoped that. And in some sense he was justified, but on the other hand, not. And that's where we... in a sense, one of the wonderful things about quantum mechanics, however, is, let's remember, Newton had hoped that the wave characterization of light was not the end of the story. I don't know where we're going to get this in, but it's important.
Well, it's Newton, in his Principia, his book on physics, commiserated on the fact that he felt that his theory of gravity was incomplete because he could not understand how the Earth and the Moon could exert a force on each other across empty space without anything physical passing in between them. Again, we're back to Einstein's spooky action of the distance.
And he postulated particles. He simply, but he said, he didn't postulate them. He says he formed no, he was not going to go there in terms of making a hypothesis about it. But he does express a preference for that, for all the reasons that you gave.
And one that you were talking about intelligence as being a common factor here. I think we might want to reconsider the word as consciousness, because intelligence does indeed come through consciousness, but consciousness is somehow more fundamental. To be conscious means I'm aware of myself and aware of the world around me. The biggest unexplored area of science is consciousness. We can't even answer the question, are animals conscious? Are they aware? Obviously, they're aware of the world around them. Where does consciousness begin and end? Is it something unique? We human beings tend to think we're the only conscious ones because we have intelligence, yet perhaps we just have a language problem in the dialogue we have with other conscious entities in sharing a common language. But this is the forefront of where science, if it really wants to understand the world better, it's going to have to understand the role of consciousness, and that brings us to spirituality, concepts of being interrelated, all the things that we equate with religion. And until this is finally integrated into the total system, we're not going to answer these questions.
That's right. And that gets us back to the notion of the model. It's only by understanding conscious, or I prefer to call it self-conscious, because that may be your answer about the animal. In simple, without stretching language much, I think we can agree that the cat is aware of things in her environment. So she's conscious of the ball as it rolls across the floor. I think we feel comfortable with language like that. What's missing, you might want to argue, and it is argued, this is the earmark of the human, is that the cat cannot reflectively be aware of the fact that it is being aware of the ball. There's not self-consciousness there. There's not an awareness of itself as a conscious being. Conscious being without self-consciousness as a conscious being, by the way, in the Kabbalistic studies that I'm involved in, becomes the differentiating point of the human. It's the highest pitch, and that's why it is the central model. It's the highest pitch of intelligence. It's therefore the best example of intelligence. But then we argue backwards. Here's the qualification. You said, what about consciousness? Doesn't this mean we have to go back to the notion of what consciousness is? The answer is yes, we must. A, because it's going to be the key to understanding the model. And B, it's because it's going to be our main topic of conversation when we get to the human being, us, and our particular characteristics within this whole thing, which is indeed very special. So you argue backwards. What I mean by that is this. Suppose we accept the idea, going back to the biological realm for just a moment. Suppose we accept the idea that the cells of the body are in communication, actual communication with one another. That this is that in the next half century, and by the way, this is a guess of mine, in the next half century of biology, a lot of work is going to be done that will show the actual kinds of signaling and communication that are going on between cells of the body. A lot of it becomes measurable, will be the subject of empirical investigation. And some interesting things are going to turn up as far as the communication among parts of the body is concerned. And again, that's not a big surprise if you consider that there must be something to the fact that each part of the system has a map of the whole thing in the DNA code. Something has to be going on here. Each, in other words, has the whole language. We could put it that way, because now we're going to get back to the informational, theoretical aspect of it. Real communication. But now, here's where our language, and I'm very self-conscious about language, human language, the language of a philosopher, what I can use. We're trying, with the very limited resources of our language, to get things right. And when we get a formulation, to put it in a good perspective. I don't want to say that the cells are talking to each other in just the same way that two human beings are talking to each other. I don't want to say that a cell has any awareness of the fact that it is a communicant in a communication. So, and this, by the way, brings you to Hegel and a lot of the other branches of Kabbalistic thinking. The interesting thing is that there's intelligence in the system all the way from the bottom up, because there's communication within the systems from the bottom all the way up, but only at a certain consummation and by degrees, because when you get to the animals, you're already getting to a certain level of undoubted intelligence before you get to language. When we're just dealing with the wonderful cats that I've been talking about, you have a marvelous level of, nature has produced an amazing level of intelligence in the cat, no question. But when you get to us, this is how the system begins to come together. When you get to us, you get to the point where the communicative system understands itself to be a communicative system. And it can thereby self-consciously and purposively participate. It can do it on purpose. It doesn't just communicate. It knows itself to be a communicator and therefore is asking itself the question, how shall I put this? All right. Now, the whole thing has a very interesting payoff. In a way, we're not at the inner sanctum yet. Exciting as these ideas, I think they are exciting, and open up vistas for considering the strange and spooky nature of the world we live in on all levels. On all levels. You never reach a level where it gets unspooky. In other words, beyond all that wonderful spookiness, there's something else involved in the story. How do you break into it? You could do it in various ways. You could bring the subject up, in other words, in various ways. Here's my favorite. I'm only going to claim that about it. You spend some time, we're going to get back to this. We're going to look more closely at the question of what is a good conversation all about? What are its main characteristics? But I've given some sense of it. To go back to it, I want to remind you of the chief formulation. A good conversation is one in which each side is attempting successfully, I will add, to influence the other, and is always already at the same time being influenced by the others in the system. My own particular favorite way of breaking into it is by taking a look at that model of a good conversation, one in which each is affecting on purpose and being affected by, again on purpose, the other. I call this the twofoldness of being. You never get beneath it. You never reach the number one, is what I'm saying here. There's always a twofoldness about things. There's always a self and its other. It's always in a system with others. This twofoldness that you find in each and every thing, and is exemplified in a good conversation, as I've been calling it, I also said it's very rare in the world. Why is it so rare? Suddenly a different problem arises, which is that if intelligent communication is the essence of the human, why aren't we communicating so intelligently? In fact, what's very strange about this is it brings us to some of the fundamental religious issues of our Judeo-Christian heritage. It's been known for a very long time, since the time of Isaiah, that certain things didn't make sense. That there was something just plain wrong about the fact that instead of settling our problems intelligently, we did it by killing each other. And so, by the time of the Mosaic Revolution, the start at the beginnings of the Judeo-Christian revolution and things, in Judaism and Christianity, but starting with Judaism, of course, and the great prophets beginning as around 800 BC with Amos, Isaiah soon after, the greatest of them all perhaps. You have this notion that what the underlying compulsion of the universe is to create the good society. I want to make it very simple to begin with. Like we're talking kids talk. But if you ask, what is the whole history of the Judeo-Christian revolution all about? It's the idea that we're not living in a peaceable society right now. We're living an unholy existence, therefore. Various words like sin, of course, come into the picture now, at this point. When we know damned well, and damned is a good word at that juncture. We know damned well, because of the damnation of this world, that we know that it doesn't make sense by comparison with a world that we can well imagine. And then we have a problem. Why are we, as soon as we get this idea, call it the idea of the divine life, because ultimately now in Kabbalah, it's going to be God's form of spirit also. It's also going to be the human spirit, and it's going to turn out that those two things can't be disentangled from one another. What we mean by divine spirit, what we mean by human spirit, are part and parcel of each other. On the level of our spiritual awareness that we have reached, if we take intelligent communication, and that means communication as it often enough is, we know it exists, and that becomes our question. We know that people solve their problems, that get angry with each other, but then one says to them, wait a minute, there must be a way that we can talk this through. They sit down and actually do, and they don't kill each other. We know, in fact, that sometimes people are creative in solving their social problems. Remember now, all things are social. And the solving of the social problem is going to be the problem of communication, isn't it? And can we work out a communicative system? That becomes the point. If we now use our model as the standard of what a good communicative system would be all about, we find that we must judge the actual system that we're living in as a miserable failure. We live in hell as compared to what a model of good human communication would be all about, where we equally spoke but equally were being affected by one another. If that were realized on our level, and we always have this belief that it could be, because it is often enough. Again, we solve our problems often enough that way that we can, with great legitimacy, wonder why we can't regularize that. Regularize the fact that we can solve problems of otherness. There's always going to be otherness. That's the essence of communication. But you can have a communicative system where it's productive and benign. I can even differ with you. We do in a good conversation, like a platonic dialogue. But we both get somewhere because I'm listening to you as I speak to you, and you're doing the same toward me. Two different people. Back to the yin and the yang. In our conversation, you are Jeff Taylor, but you bear the influence as you speak of the person you're in communication with, Don Weiss. And you are the center, the very center of that universe, and I'm never going to be you. You're the center of your universe in a way that I'll never be, and I'm the center of mine in a way you'll never be. And that's what defines the self-other distinction. But each self is not only itself, but is also always registering the impress of the intelligence of the other. And that, again, is your communicative model. Now, the payoff comes in just right here. Suddenly we are now plunged into a world of a sense of our own sinfulness. Why this world? We even cheer it on. We think that we support a world of peace, but we do believe that, of course, that means that the Islamic State has to be annihilated. So we continue to fight our wars. We continue to try to annihilate. Of course, we say it's in the interest of long-term peace. But let's not deny that we're complicit in the system. Let's not deny that there's a complicitness in this sinful world of carnage and death. And each one of us is tainted by it. There's no question about it. What's up with this? Here's the great payoff. Kabbalah, the Kabbalistic tradition, as I think it's also wonderfully amplified by the philosopher Hegel. Well, Hegel just himself plugs himself into tendencies that were already there, actually has an answer to this question of why we are where we are, why it makes sense for us to be where we are. In fact, makes sense to the point where we can stop beating up on ourselves for being where we are and get down to real business. It's an evolutionary story. It's a story that actually takes itself seriously and says, wait a minute, I understand. If everything is a dialogue, the reason why we are where we are is that this is the point at which the whole dialogue has come, well, as of what we call now. If all things are such systems, and all such systems are developmental, evolution is everywhere, and of course we now recognize how well that goes with all the rest of science, the Big Bang, an actual beginning in time, 13.8 billion years ago, or whatever they say it is right now, according to their current estimations of it. A universe which, by the way, is evolutionary through and through. If you go back a couple of centuries ago, you didn't have the theory of stars that we have now. Now when we talk about red giants, brown dwarfs, and ordinary good, robust stars like our own, now the astronomers know what they're talking about. They're talking about stages in the development of a star from youth, adolescence, to middle age, to decline, to death. The stars themselves. That's interesting because, of course, those ancient Greeks thought they were gods because they thought they were eternal. The one thing that seemed eternal to those ancients was the stars. The one firm foothold you could have in permanence, and alas and alack, no, we now know that every star is just at a certain stage of its development, since birth, its birth, and in the direction of its own death. Everything is evolutionary in this world of ours. There's nothing that stands still. And now the whole point becomes to tell the story of the evolution of human intelligence to the point that we are right now. It equips us to understand exactly the following wonderful twofold point. Why we are at the very advanced but not advanced enough point that we are, that's point number one, but also point number two, to achieve what we already have a blueprint of. With clarity of understanding, this dream that has infected the minds of every interested person in the Judeo-Christian heritage of the creation of a good society of people. I would say of real, peaceable communication with one another. That becomes the final analysis, where they beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks, as Isaiah says. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Same passage in Isaiah. I think it's the second chapter of Isaiah. Ancient. And Isaiah, of course, is a text which of all Old Testament texts influences Christianity most of all. Matthew is obsessed with the book, showing that Jesus is the suffering servant of Isaiah, reminding ourselves that not a word of Handel's Messiah is from the New Testament. Handel's Messiah is all Isaiah, the book of Isaiah. The messianic expectation is in Isaiah.
Okay.
But we still haven't gotten to the really big payoff. And maybe I should leave this one as a teaser. After all, I'll confess, we're going to have to end this first one somewhere, and wherever we end it, there's going to be an element of a tease. Because, and that's what's great about Kabbalah, by the way, it is a cliffhanger. There's always wonderful stuff unfolding from this. But this way of looking at the world, which I'm just trying to sketch in very, very broad strokes, in a preliminary, introductory sort of way. But this very broad way of talking about things, to understand it, there's one more component that you must understand. Only at the point that you have this human self-conscious realization of communication as purposive being, now we get it. Now we get that the essence of what we are, the essence of our being, is good communication. But getting it means we've gotten used to doing it. The people who get it are the people who do it. We've become self-consciously purposive in our communication with one another. This is, in a way, the outcome of the process. And for the first time, you have self-conscious, intelligent being fully realized. Think about what I just said. It kind of, I'll have a qualification here perhaps, but it kind of means the following, and this is where it gets spooky indeed. It sounds as if what it's saying is that divine self-consciousness only occurs at the end of this process and occurs through human beings, as if the divine itself, the divine, God, is realized only at the end of history. And yes, actually, the story, it's admitted that what I've done when I've characterized human intelligence as being in its fullness, and when it is fulfilled, the final full realization of this destiny of self-conscious communication. And when I say that only now does it exist in fully self-conscious form, then I'm saying only now does spirit actually, truly and fully exist. Only now, consistently can I say, is the divine itself realized. Oh, it may have been there early on as an idea. We'll get to that.